We conducted a meta-analysis examining the effects of Orton-Gillingham interventions on the reading outcomes of students with word-level reading difficulties and disabilities in grades K through 12. Orton-Gillingham is a direct, explicit, multisensory, structured, sequential, diagnostic, and prescriptive way to teach reading and spelling. Orton-Gillingham interventions have a lot of overlapping characteristics with non-Orton-Gillingham interventions that provide explicit word reading instruction. However, Orton-Gillingham interventions differ from these other types of programs in their simultaneous use of the visual, auditory, and kinesthetic and tactile senses. 47 states have dyslexia legislation that protects the rights of individuals with dyslexia beyond the requirements under IDEA. The majority of these states mandate the use of a multisensory approach to reading instruction, which is oftentimes thought to be the key ingredient or the defining feature of these Orton-Gillingham reading programs. However, 7 states require specific training or implementation of Orton-Gillingham interventions for students with dyslexia. Findings from a prior systematic review conducted by Ritchie and Goke in 2006 and from What Works Clearinghouse reports in 2010, 2012, and 2013 demonstrated limited evidence to support the use of Orton-Gillingham interventions. However, despite this limited evidence supporting its efficacy, Orton-Gillingham interventions remain firmly entrenched in both policy and practice, calling for more research investigating the effects of these types of interventions for students with word-level reading difficulties and disabilities such as dyslexia. Therefore, we conducted a meta-analysis examining the following research questions. First, what are the effects of Orton-Gillingham interventions for students identified with or at risk for word-level reading difficulties or disabilities in grades K through 12? And second, are intervention effects moderated by study quality as determined by research design, the nature of instruction in the comparison condition, implementation fidelity, and year of publication? The weighted mean effect size for the 15 studies that included one or more measures of foundational skills was 0.32. The mean effect size was not statistically significantly different from 0, with a p of 0.24, indicating that students who received Orton-Gillingham interventions did not experience significantly larger effects on these measures than students who received comparison reading instruction. In the meta-analysis of vocabulary and comprehension measures, the weighted mean effect size for the 10 included studies was 0.14. As with the foundational reading skill measures, the effect size of Orton-Gillingham interventions across studies was not significantly different from 0, meaning that the students in Orton-Gillingham intervention did not significantly benefit at a greater rate than students in the comparison condition. These effect sizes were positive, but not significant. And this indicates that there's promise that Orton-Gillingham interventions may positively impact students' reading outcomes, and that these types of effect sizes may be indicative of educationally meaningful progress for students with word-level reading difficulties and disabilities such as dyslexia. Studies were rated on 3 indicators of study quality. They were rated on research design, comparison condition instruction, and implementation fidelity. And overall, most studies included in this meta-analysis had study qualities that fell below the acceptable level, indicating overall poor study quality for the corpus. Quality scores were not significant predictors of effect sizes on foundational skill outcomes or vocabulary and comprehension outcomes. These findings raise concerns about dyslexia legislation mandating the use of Orton-Gillingham interventions. Advocacy groups often perceive that schools are inadequately meeting the needs of their children with dyslexia, and consequently, these groups have pushed for legislation that they perceived as most helpful for their children who have word-level reading difficulties and disabilities. However, it seems that legislation has come before evidence documenting what works for students with word-level reading difficulties and disabilities such as dyslexia. Due to the overall low quality of studies included in this meta-analysis, these findings do not definitively prove that Orton-Gillingham interventions are not impactful for students with word-level reading difficulties and disabilities. In addition, findings do not suggest that other reading programs are more effective than Orton-Gillingham. Instead, the findings from this meta-analysis really do suggest that we don't yet know the answers to these questions, and that more high-quality research is needed investigating the effects of Orton-Gillingham interventions.